You are listening to Prophet Pearls with Nehemia Gordon and Keith Johnson, exploring biblical prophecy for yesterday, today, and tomorrow.
Welcome to Prophet Pearls, recorded live in Jerusalem, the city of the prophets and the eternal capital of Israel, with Keith Johnson and Nehemia Gordon. That's me.
Hey, no, listen, we are in Israel, Nehemia. We're in the land of Israel. We're doing a 2-week intensive. Literally, it's a 2-week intensive. For those who don't realize, what we've decided to do is we came together and we said for 2 weeks we're going to record everything. We prepared for several weeks, obviously, for this. We have people who are our Prophet Pearl partners, our servants of El Elyon are actually the folks that are doing this one. But we have people that have made comments and some that haven't made comments during this time, but will add their comments in the comment section at NehemiaWall.com and BFAinternational.com. But we've got a lot of people that have been praying for us, that are entering with us. But this is a major thing. We're here at a really interesting time in Israel. But for this 2 weeks, we're literally every single day studying, reading, discussing, praying about the Word of God. And that's exciting. I mean, I just got to tell you today, I thought to myself, what kind of a deal is this? I get to talk about the Word of God all day today. It's amazing. Absolutely amazing. So we're in 2 Kings today, chapter 4, verse 42 is where we start. And I want to know why this section snuck in there before the other section. That's what I really want to know.
Before what other section? What are you talking about?
Well, there's 2 sections. There's this section here. It's just a few verses, and then it deals with the servant who was healed of leprosy. But the section before it, I mean, is really a cool section for me. It kind of gives me context for some other things, but I don't know if you noticed.
In other words, why didn't they start the section in chapter 5?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. Can you help me with that?
That's a really good question.
You can't help me with that.
So the Torah portion is Tazria, which is Leviticus 12, verses 1 through 13:59, which actually fits with the story of Naaman.
Exactly.
Which has to do with leprosy. Why this is there? Yeah, I don't know. You got an answer?
No, I don't, but it sure is going to help me as far as thinking. I'll give you some thoughts about,
sure.
Making connections.
In other words, verses 42 to 44 have... Or 44 have got nothing to do with the following 5:1. What's that doing in there? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Sure.
So can I read it?
Sure.
So it says, a man came from Baal Shalisha, bringing the man of God 20 loaves of... I know why it's in here, by the way. Bringing the man of God 20 loaves of barley bread baked from the first ripe grain, along with some heads of new grain. Give it to the people to eat, Elisha says. I'm looking at this and I'm saying, okay, so here a man comes. I don't know why he came. I'm assuming he's coming to bless the man of God. I don't know if the intention was to give it to Elisha or whether it really was for the people. But either way, Elisha says, give it to the people to eat. And then he says, how can I eat this before 100 men? How can I set this before 100 men? His servant asked. But Elisha said, give it to the people to eat, for this is what Yehovah says. They will eat and have some left over. Then he set it before them, and they ate and had some left over according to the word of Yehovah. Mm-hmm. Now, when I read that, I'm immediately brought to the New Testament. You're usually the guy that brings up the New Testament and says, in Matthew it says, and Revelation says. But when I read this, I think about the feeding of the 500. Here it's a feeding of 100. Feeding of 500 or 5,000, I'm sorry, 5,000. And there's actually another example where it's 4,000. There's a couple different places where this happens. But I think one of the things that's so interesting about it is that you have these things that happen, and this is a completely different discussion. I don't want to go too far down the road. But you have these situations that happen in the Tanakh, and this is just one of them, where we see it here. Here's an example of something happening. And then when we see it later in the New Testament, for me, until I really started reading the Tanakh, I never knew this story was here. I never knew this section was even here. Never even knew that there were any connections like that. But then now being able to read it and to see that connection, it's just really kind of cool for me to look at it and say, wow, this is something that happened before. So for the people who were reading the Tanakh and they see this happening in the New Testament, did they think, oh, this is what Elisha did? In other words, like in their minds, did they think, oh, this is something that Elisha did? So like I said, for me, it really was an interesting thing. And I don't know why the section's there. I do think it is kind of interesting.
You had the secret, Rabbi.
I don't know why the section's there. But let me ask this question. Is this, we have other examples of people bringing things to the man of God. We had the story where the woman provided the house for Elisha, the room for him where he went to stay. So is that something, and I just want to bring this up in terms of people giving things to, in this situation, giving them to Elisha. Is there some spiritual basis for that? Is it a practical thing? Is it, are they providing for him? What do you think's happening here?
Yeah, he's doing God's work and he needs to eat. And, so they're feeding him like it's kind of obvious.
So, so you're saying that, but even though he comes and he brings the food to him, Elisha says, give it to the people. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I don't know if it's so obvious. I mean, what do you mean it's obvious? I mean, it maybe, you're saying that it's obvious that he needs the bread, but the story says he gives the bread away. So
we've got the story of Elijah where the ravens come and bring him food. Mm-hmm. But other than that, generally, people need to eat. And if somebody is engaged in the work of God, then those who are benefiting from it, they should feed him. That seems, Mm-hmm. And you're right. Here he's saying, look, I'm not the one who needs to eat. Watch what I can do. And he performs this miracle. And I love how it ends in verse 44. It says, Ki dvar Yehovah, according to the word of Yehovah, or literally like the word of Yehovah. Mm-hmm. And it reminded me of the verse Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 3, where it says, let's see, he fed you or manna in English, he fed you the man, which you did not know and your fathers did not know, in order to inform you that not upon bread alone shall live man.
Yes.
Ki imal motza, kol motza pi Yehovah. For according to all that goes forth out of the mouth of Yehovah shall a man live. Yichei hadam. So that seems to me like a really cool connection here that we've got. Here they're eating based on the word of Yehovah, on what comes out of the mouth of Yehovah, and the same thing here in Deuteronomy 8:3. That's what it speaks to me. That maybe the message here is, look, you think you need to feed those who are doing Yehovah's work, but he can take care of himself. On the other hand, look, did we do the story where he had the upper room and she prepared for him?
Of course we did that story. It was one of our best ones.
I don't remember.
You were in my upper room at my house.
That's
you remember that.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Okay. So, I mean, in a very practical basis, if someone's engaged in God's work, the people who worship Yehovah and care about his word, they need to feed that person.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I will say this, Nehemia, one of the things, the great advantages about obviously being together, and again, the way that we've done this, I used to always argue with you about the fact that I would be opening up my Tanakh and you'd have this computer with all this information. And folks, I got to tell you something, this computer, it frustrated me because I'd ask him a question, he'd tap, 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 and boom, it would come up. Eventually, I gave in. And I realized it's really a powerful thing because you can get information. And I want to throw just one thing out to you to check because you can do this so quick.
Yeah.
So in the beginning it says a man came from Baal Shalisha bringing the man of God. How many times do we see the phrase man of God? And the reason I'm asking this question is that this is a situation where obviously this is one of the ways that he's being described. And we also know that Elisha was a prophet. Maybe there are other terms that were used. Yeah. But I just thought it was just kind of interesting, how many times do we see it, and not to go into the details of who all are called that, but it's there. Just as one of those.
So we've got it 76 times.
76 times, and that's the okay.
Yeah, that's what I got.
76 times. Oh, wow. Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Well, maybe we could do.
So, for example, we have the first one is Deuteronomy 33:1, where it says Moshe Isha Elohim, Moses the man of God.
Yes.
We've got, let's see, Joshua 14:6. We've got, again, there is Moshe Isha Elohim.
Yeah.
But then Judges 13:6. We'll get to this section actually.
Yeah.
The woman says to her husband, she says, Isha Elohim ba'ilai, a man of God came to me.
Yes.
And we actually find out later it's not actually a man, it's an angel.
That's right.
But it looks like a man to her, I guess. So we've got. I mean, you want me to go through all 7?
No. I just wanted to be able to throw that out there that there are these examples of.
There's a bunch of
times that it'd be called.
And I should point out this phrase "man of God" could also be translated as divine man in Hebrew. There is that concept that Isha Elohim is a man of God, but it also means there's something about that man that's divine. Not that the man is God, of course, but he's got the divinity in him, the spirit in him, pretty cool.
Okay. Well, we have that story. We're not sure exactly why it's there, but we did do what we.
I'm sure we can look and find, in the midrash and find out, why the rabbi stuck it there. But I wasn't that interested. I'm more interested in the story that comes after it.
You like the story after? Would you
King's chapter, because it ties into the weekly Torah portion, which has to do with leprosy, and it opens up. It says Naaman was an officer of the army of the king of Aram. That's Syria today. He was a great.
You just want to casually say that? Tell the people again.
Aram today is Syria.
Okay, it's Syria.
Okay. Well, because there were 3 Aramean kingdoms, people who speak Aramaic, they were called Arameans, and there were 3 major Aramean kingdoms. There was Aram Naharaim, or Aram between the 2 rivers. Today we call that Iraq. There was Aram Damascus, or Aram of Damascus, and there was Aram Tsova, which today is Aleppo, or northern Syria. So those were 3 ancient Aramean kingdoms, and there were other ones, but those are the 3 main ones. So when it says Aram, and it doesn't say which one, it means Aram Damascus, Aram of Damascus, because that was the one that Israel had the most interaction with, for obvious reasons. Aram, and in some translations, I think it says Syria, which is correct. Syria, actually, that word comes from the name of a major mountain in southwestern Syria, or southwestern Aram Damascus, which is called Mount Hermon in Hebrew, and we're told the Arameans call that Syrian. That's where you get the word Syria.
I got to tell you something. I might be maybe the smartest guy in the world as far as it pertains. It's because what I told him a long time ago is you always got to find people to get around you that are smarter than you. You're a walking encyclopedia, Nehemia. I love when you do this kind of stuff. I say, there it is, Aram. Well, it's also Samaria, it's the mountain, it's all on the southwest. I love when you do that kind of stuff. It excites me. I really enjoy it. I know the people love it too.
Deuteronomy 3:9, it says the Sidonians, they call Hermon Syrian.
Exactly.
And the Amorites call it Sneer. And then also that appears again in Psalm 29:6, this reference to Syrian, and that's where we get the word Syria.
Excellent.
But the ancients called it Aram.
Okay.
Aram Damascus. Okay. All right. So Naaman was an officer of the army, and you could translate it as general, of the king of Aram. He was a great man before his master, before his lord, and literally Nisu Panim, he was raised of face, or respected. For in him Yehovah gave salvation to Aram. And the man was a great warrior, a valorous warrior, and Metzora, he was a leper, which is like kind of just stuck in there at the end. All these other things he is, but he's also a leper. And I love this statement that why was he great? Because Yehovah gave him through him salvation to Aram. And then what I'm reminded of is the section where Jephthah is writing to the king of the Ammonites, and they're fighting over some territory. And he says, "Is it not that which Chemosh, your God, gave you to inherit? You will inherit." And all that Yehovah, our God, has given to before us to inherit, we will inherit. And it's almost like he's acknowledging this pagan deity. Whereas here in this story, we're being told, no, it wasn't the God of the Arameans who gave them, whose name was Hadad, by the way.
Yep.
It wasn't that that he was great because Hadad gave him victory. It was because Yehovah, the God of Israel, gave him victory.
And it's something, we could just move on there, or I could get really excited as I did as I read about this and thought about this. And even as I was thinking about it again this morning, it just, to me, when I read the first verse of this story, and I hear these words, and he was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded. And why? Because through him, Yehovah had given victory to Aram. Now I stop and I say, okay,
victory?
Well, that's what it says, victory. He gave salvation, gave deliverance. But the focus that I see is, and this is a curveball, and we're supposed to slow down and say it's a curveball. Wait a minute. It's supposed to say this. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded because Yehovah had given a salvation to Israel. Wait a minute. What is this going on here where it says Yehovah gave victory to Syria?
What's the problem?
No, not what the problem is.
Well,
let me finish. Let me finish. What excites me about it is it lets me know about the bigness of God. Amen. It lets me know about how amazing he is as the great orchestrator. It lets me know he's the one who's moving pieces, chess pieces, what do you want to call it, all over the entire world. And in this situation, for some reason, whatever the reason is, and we're going to find out more about it, is that God has a plan and had a plan that even through this man, there was victory to a country that's not central.
Which is the enemy of Israel.
Nehemia, what do you mean? We got to stop and talk about that. I mean,
what this reminds me of? And this is something you shared with me years ago about how when you were a chaplain of the Vikings and doing the sports ministry, that you would go to pray before the game. And wasn't there some kind of thing you told me about saying, well, if God gives victory to our team, does that mean he's taking it away from the other team?
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. That's why
over the Vikings against whoever.
Yeah, I'm sorry about the coughing, everybody. I got this thing going on, and it's not going away. So please bear with me. I'm going to try to speak less, let Nehemia speak more. But I've got to every once in a while I got to stop and say something, because when I think about this, and I'm glad you brought up the example of those days when I would do that. people always say, well, which team you're on? It reminds me of this story, the important story in Joshua, where Joshua goes before the man of God, the angel, and he says, are you for us or for your enemy? And the angel says, no. He just says no. You got the wrong question. It's not a matter if I'm for which team. Are you for me? And I look at this. I look at this story. Yeah, I look at this story, and honestly, I stop because it's going to connect later when we're talking and remind me about this, Nehemia, through my coughing. That what this tells me right away is there's a bigger picture. Yeah. And there's a bigger picture in terms of what Yehovah is doing. Now, we happen to be presently, and I'm going to just bring this up, we happen to be presently here in Israel during a really intense time. Though you're listening to this in late March, I believe they're listening to this in late March. We're actually here, this is the morning after Netanyahu went before Congress in a really controversial situation where he went and spoke.
It's actually April 18th.
It's April. Oh, this is April. Are you serious?
Yeah.
You're kidding me. We were that far.
Yeah, we've done so many episodes. Yeah.
Okay, well, anyways, if you didn't hear about that, it really is interesting. But he's talking about what's happening in the region and in different...
Right. So today, when we're recording this, it's March 4th, 2015.
It's March 4th, yeah. And actually, as I was listening to that, and I was thinking about this, and I just think about the amazing how God is, in all through Scripture, he not only operates, let me say this, he not only operates on behalf of Israel, he operates on behalf of his creation. And what he does in his creation, sometimes, like when I read this story, I'm like, wait a minute. Now, you just told us about Assyria. What do you mean?
Syria, not Assyria.
Yeah, Syria. Yeah, okay. I said Syria. Okay, maybe I'm sorry. You see
how
you
see?
No. He'll go back and he'll check this whole thing out. He'll make him.
We'll edit this out.
We'll edit this out. But no, just the point. And again, what excited me about it was that Yehovah had given victory to Aram, which means it has to be for his purposes. It wasn't given to him because he's a good guy. There's his purposes, and his purposes are well beyond sometimes what we think, and it just shows about his bigness. That's really what hit me on that whole thing.
Yeah. By the way, just for those who don't know, Assyria is a completely different kingdom, which was in northeastern Iraq today. Mm-hmm. In Hebrew, it's called Ashur, and this kingdom of Syria is called Aram or Syrian in Hebrew. So Syria and Assyria are two completely different things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's why I said Syria.
I'm sure he did.
Well, verse 2, can you read that?
Sure. Where are we? Verse 2. Okay, I got this here in the Hebrew. And Aram went out as bands of raiders, and they captured from the land of Israel a young girl. And she was before the wife of Naaman. I mean, she was a servant there. And I think this was interesting to me because I've recently done a bunch of research on the European invasion of America, and how when they would interact with the Native Americans or the Indians, very often there would be someone who was taken as a child, and then that person would become the interpreter. And it actually went both ways, meaning there were settlers, European settlers who were captured as children, and then they would translate for the Indians, and vice versa. So this kind of reminded me of that. Like, here's somebody who has a foot in both cultures and can explain things. And it goes on, and she said to her mistress, Achale, which is a really difficult word to translate. What do you have there in verse 3 for...
So, if only?
If only, okay. So I love this because achale in later Hebrew is the word halavai, which is a word I actually growing up didn't know was Hebrew. Really? I thought that was, halavai or alavai is something like, if only, It's just a word that we used in the Jewish speech. And here is the biblical form, achale. If only my Lord would be before the prophet who was in Shomron in Samaria, then literally his leprosy would be gathered from him. It would be gathered away. It would be taken away. Do you have anything to say about that?
I do have something to say just about before that.
Yeah.
So again, I said why this caught my attention in the beginning. It says that he gave victory for Aram. Now, bands from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel. Was this one of the victories that they were given?
I don't know.
I'm just saying. And the reason I think that, and the reason I throw that as a possibility, is that we know the end of the story. But again, and what's under the end of the story is that God has this ability.
But yours translated as victory. In my Hebrew, it says salvation.
Salvation.
And I take that to mean Aram was actually under attack from someone else. And whoever that enemy was, we actually don't know, that enemy was defeated.
Okay, awesome. Well, we do know this. We do know that Aram also included in what they were doing was taking captive people from Israel, and that was allowed. And so, and it's being allowed. we have this servant, and so this servant is there. And again, like I said, we know the end of the story, and we're going to go through the story. But I'm actually read it from a different perspective now.
Yeah. As
I'm reading it, okay, well, Yehovah's got this thing that he's doing with this country. For what? I think we'll find out. So let's continue.
Yeah.
If only my master would see the prophet who's in Samaria. How does she know that?
Because she's from there.
She's actually from there.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
He would cure him of his leprosy, which I think, by the way, this is another statement about her. I mean, think about this. She's captive. She's held captive. She's been taken from her land, and she's coming and saying, "Hey, let me, there's a way that there could be some help for you." I mean, I think we talked about this before, but it's like, wow. I mean, she's in my terms, she's witnessing right now. I mean,
Can I say something else about her?
Yeah.
So she's really an Israeli.
Yeah.
Israelis will give you unsolicited advice even when you don't want it. This is what we do. And I just spent a year in China where we've been spending time now. And one of the things about the Chinese culture is they've been trained, don't give advice even when people ask for it, because you may shame the person by telling him he doesn't know what he's doing. And in the Jewish culture, if we see something wrong, we speak up.
No, isn't that the truth?
Exactly. Who asked her opinion?
Who asked her opinion? But again, I think it really says something about her. She's basically saying, she's the one that's a captive, and she's saying, look, my master actually could be helped if he would see the man of God in Samaria. By the way, the place where I'm from.
Right. You want to read verse 4?
Naaman. Go ahead.
Okay. And he came and he told his master, meaning the king of Aram, saying, like this and like that, spoke the girl who was from the land of Israel. And the king of Aram said, go and come, and I will send, and I love it when it says in Hebrew, I will send a book, sefer. I will send a book, or I guess an epistle, but literally it says book, to the king of Israel. And he went and he took in his hand 10 talents of silver and 6,000 gold, probably not talents, probably shekels. And this is interesting. It says, and 10 changes of clothing.
Wow.
Doesn't that give you an indication of clothes, how valuable it was?
Wow.
Today I go to Walmart and I buy a shirt for $4. And, if I get a stain in it, I just, if I can't clean it out, I throw it away and get another $4 shirt.
Yeah, I wish there was a Walmart. It took me 2 days to find a pair of underwear here.
It's not like that here in Israel. But imagine in ancient times, a change of clothing was equivalent, or not equivalent, but was up there with gold and silver. And it says in verse 6, and he brought the book, HaSefer. What do you have? Do you have book?
Let's see here. He brought the letter.
The letter, but it literally says Sefer. And really, Sefer, book, is any written document. Like in Deuteronomy 24, we read about the certificate of divorce or certificate of separation, and the word there is Sefer. It's a book. And he brought the book to the king of Israel, saying, and now when this book comes to you, behold, I have sent to you Naaman my servant, and you shall take away his leprosy. And it came to pass, when the book was read, when the king of Israel read the book, he tore his clothes and he said, "Am I God to kill and to make alive, to kill and to resurrect? That this one is sending to me, that I should remove his leprosy, remove the man's leprosy? For no, surely." And see that he's looking for an excuse against me. That's what it says there. And I think what's really interesting to me about the story is and especially the fact that it's a book. That's lost in your English with your little letter.
Yep.
But it says in Hebrew a sefer. So here they come before the king and they read a sefer. And what is that? That should speak to you. There's two other examples in the Bible where someone came before a king of Israel or Judah and read a book. And one example is where they came before Jeremiah, they came before the king of Israel, the king of Judah, and they read the book that Jeremiah wrote, with the book of Jeremiah's prophecies. Do you remember what it says there of what they did? So the scribe would read it, and it said he would read a section, and then he'd take the razor and cut it out and throw it in the fire.
But they'd read it first.
But they'd read it first. And it was a way of mocking Jeremiah. Yep. Here's what this crazy prophet says, and Jeremiah had the last laugh, or Yehovah had the last laugh, and the other story this reminds me of is where they came before King Josiah and they read the book they found in the temple, and that was the Torah, and in that story as well, Josiah tears his clothes, and I think that is such an amazing image. The king of Israel in this story here in Kings, he tears his clothes when hearing the quote book of the king of Aram. Josiah tore his clothes when hearing the book of the King of Kings. Yeah. In both cases, they realized they were in trouble. That's why they were tearing their clothes. And just as a side note, we talked about yesterday and today and tomorrow, the application of today. I bet there are people who are tearing their clothes when they hear about what's going on with the leadership in America.
Not only in America, in lots of places.
I agree with you about that.
No, I mean it's really. I mean, but
when
let me
the
just
epistle
ask.
comes from the King of America.
Let me ask you a question, Nehemia.
Yeah.
And I bet you can't tap for this one. Okay, folks, it's a test. It's a test. I'm gonna see how long it takes him. Nehemia, it says here, the King of Israel. Ready? You ready? Get your fingers ready. Here we go. What was the King of Israel's name? Quickly, you've got 10 seconds.
Yeah, that's a
10,
really interesting question.
9,
give me the answer.
8, 7. Folks, this is finally going to be at 6, 5.
Give me the answer.
4, 3.
I'm not looking. I'm
2.
waiting for you to give me the answer.
He doesn't know. I can't believe it. And neither do I.
Yeah.
No, I don't either. It's kind of funny because we're reading in this story. It says the King of Israel, and you really have to you'd have to put some pieces together to try to figure out.
You can infer it.
You could kind of infer it, but
so
it isn't clear, which really, to me, honestly, is a part of the purpose of this thing. It isn't about the King of Israel.
Yeah.
It really isn't. It isn't about the King of Israel. It isn't about him, saying, am I the one to do this? And then, of course, Elisha comes in, and that's what the great part of the story. It goes on to say.
It also doesn't mention what the name of the king of Aram is.
No, it doesn't say the name of the king of Aram.
Right.
Now, and so again, but here's Elisha. He hears, he hears what's happening. The man of God heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes. Now, can you hear this? Can you hear it? Elisha's there, preparing prophet pearls. He's about to do his next section. He's going over his next section. He's about to do, and here comes one of the servants. Says, man of God, yes, I'm busy. The king just tore his robes. Why did he tear his robes? Well, there was a book that was sent from the king of Aram, and it's ugly. And it's so funny because what does Elisha say? He says, why have you torn your robes? He sent him this message. Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there's a prophet in Israel. Just like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's amazing. I mean, it's like Elisha doesn't, get all wrapped up into it and all this. It's just send them to me, and then of course we can go further. And I don't want to go too fast, too far. But can I continue?
Yeah, please.
Okay. He says, and he will know that there's a prophet in Israel. So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. And then this is what I think is so interesting. Yeah. Elisha doesn't go out and say, well, here's the great commander out there. Let me go and schmooze with him. The commander's here. Let me go and, stick my chest out. He says, he sent a messenger saying to him, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed. That's it. Go wash yourself in the Jordan.
Like I'm not going to even see you?
I'm not even going to come. Look, I'm working on prophet pearls. I'm here studying. You kidding me? Just go to the Jordan and wash yourself 7 times. And again, the story is a phenomenal story because listen, let's talk about the Jordan for a second. And he basically.
Well, let's hear what he has to say.
Yeah, let's see what he has to say about the Jordan. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I've said this before that there are unnamed streams in Washington State that are bigger than the Jordan River. That flow into some of the river. Anyway, so we are here in. Let's see. We are in. Okay, what verse are we in?
Come on. It says It says we are here in the verse.
Yeah.
Go now. Da, 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 da. Yes, verse 10.
Verse 10.
Yeah.
And Elisha sent to him a messenger. It literally says malach, an angel, but also it means a messenger, saying, we read this.
Yep.
Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will return to you, and be clean, or ritually clean, tahor.
Before you go any further, obviously this is an obvious issue. So what's the section in Leviticus we're reading, and why they picked this section?
It's the section on leprosy.
Exactly.
Right, exactly. Okay. And Naaman was angry, and he went away.
No, the English says he was furious.
Oh, okay. All right. He was angry. He was furious. And he said, "Behold, I said to myself, he will surely come out, and he will stand and call in the name of Yehovah, his God, and he shall wave his hand to the place, and the leprosy will be removed."
Oh,
and that is
so
so profound.
What a picture!
Because what Naaman is looking for, Naaman is looking for here, he's looking for the hocus pocus.
Mm-hmm.
They knew this from ancient times, that magicians would heal in the name of gods and angels and one of the things they would do. We find this in the literature of magic. And unfortunately, there's actually a Jewish magical literature, which probably some of it may predate the Torah, meaning, and I don't say that in a good way. When the Torah comes along in Deuteronomy 18 and forbids magic, it's because magic existed in ancient Israel. And what magic really was, it wasn't, pulling a rabbit out of a hat. It was healing in the name of a god. And essentially what they were doing was forcing a god to do their will. And what they would do is, the word in English, it's not a word that everybody knows, it's to adjure, A-D-J-U-R-E. In Hebrew, it's lahashbia. What they would do is they would essentially force the god or the angel or the deity to swear that he would heal. They would force him into an oath. And that was the purpose of the magical incantation. And so-called Jewish magicians, they would heal in the name of Yehovah. And it's actually interesting. That's one of the reasons, I've talked about how it was because of Roman persecution that the rabbis forbade people to speak the name, Yehovah. But there was a secondary reason, which was an internal reason. And the internal reason, we're told, is that there were people healing in the name. And that was seen in Jewish sources as magic. And we actually have some of these magical sources. One of the famous one is the Hebraicos Logos, or in the great magical papyrus of Leiden. Anyway, so there were people who were healing using this name as if it was some kind of power, that it was a power that you could essentially get power over Yehovah or harness his power through the name. And in Jewish sources, and in my view in biblical sources, that is viewed as magic. That's a negative thing. That's forbidden. And we see, like, for example, when Elisha does heal, and when Eliyahu does heal, Elijah and Elisha, they pray. They're not saying, "Hey God, here's what you have to do." It's not, they don't have the power. Yehovah has the power, and they're asking him to do something. No. And so this is what Naaman expects. He expects the hocus pocus.
Well, here's what I think is the probably the most interesting thing to me about this verse is again, now I'm, like I said, what I appreciate so much in Nehemia is that when we get to some of these questions and finding the information and finding statistics and stuff is just, it's phenomenal what the computer can do. Yeah. But you look in the Hebrew text and you see this that I think takes this to a different level. If it said this, I thought, if it said this, I thought he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God. That's what it says in English. If that's what Naaman said, and even if in Hebrew it said something like, and he called upon on the Lord his God, Adonai or something like that. But what it says is that he would call, and this is Naaman saying this, I thought he would stand and call upon the name Yehovah, his God. So Naaman, this is what's so amazing to me. Naaman knows the name of Yehovah. He says, I thought he would come out and call upon the name Yehovah.
Right.
It doesn't say, I thought he would come out and call upon the name of his God, or, Adonai, or, it says Yehovah. And so Naaman actually says the name and says, okay, aren't you going to come and do that? Aren't you going to come out and stand here, wave your hands and say, in the name Yehovah, blah, blah, blah. And that's where the frustration comes. Yeah. And instead he sends out a messenger. Then here comes the part that I think is so funny.
I want to focus on this hocus pocus. To me, this is amazing that he's expecting some kind of magic, and this reminds me. We may have shared this in the original Torah pearls, but I want to share it again. It's a story that happened in the first century, where there was a rabbi named Yochanan ben Zakkai, and we're told about how he had this interaction with some kind of Greek or Roman. Can I read that story?
Yes, please.
It says, a Gentile asked Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, these rituals that you perform look like a kind of magic. You bring a heifer, burn it, pound it, and take its ashes. If one of you is defiled by a dead body, you sprinkle upon him 2 or 3 drops and say to him, you are clean. Imagine that. So this is talking about the ritual of the red heifer in Numbers 19. In the eyes of a pagan, this looks like not just paganism, magic.
Yes.
Which even to a pagan is maybe in certain pagan traditions is a forbidden thing. Rabbi Yochanan asked him, has the demon of madness ever possessed you? No, the Roman replied. Have you ever seen a man possessed by this demon of madness? Yes, he said. And Rabbi Yochanan says, and what do you do in such a case? And the Roman replies, we bring roots and make them smoke under him. Then we sprinkle water upon the demon and it flees. So this is some kind of pagan exorcism. And it's interesting, in the mind of the Romans, exorcisms were just fine as long as it wasn't magic, which I have trouble wrapping my head around. But anyway, Rabbi Yochanan said to him, let your ears hear what you utter with your mouth. Precisely so is this spirit, a spirit of uncleanness. Water of purification is sprinkled upon the unclean, and the spirit flees.
Yes.
Okay, so he is essentially describing the red heifer ritual as a type of magical exorcism. Mm-hmm. When the idolater had gone, Rabbi Yochanan's disciples said to their master, Master, you have thrust off that heathen with a mere reed of an answer, but what explanation will you give to us? In other words, we know that can't be the answer because we know the red heifer is not about exorcism. Mm-hmm. Rabbi Yochanan said to him, I swear it is not the dead that defiles, nor the water that purifies. The Holy One, blessed be He, merely says, I have laid down a statute, I have issued a decree. You are not allowed to transgress my decree. In other words, there's nothing inherent about a dead body that causes you to be unclean in a ritual sense. And there's nothing inherent about, there's no supernatural power of death that causes you to be unclean. There's no supernatural power of a red heifer pounded into dust and mixed with water that causes you to be clean. But simply we are being in obedience to God's commandments. Mm-hmm. He said to do it, so we do it. Mm-hmm. I think that's really profound. Mm-hmm. And I think that this is, a first century, essentially, example of what is happening between Naaman and Elisha. That Naaman's like, what is this? Where's the magic? Where's the ritual?
Where's the magic at?
Where's the sprinkling and what's going on here?
Come out and yell real loud.
Where's the show? Put on the hocus pocus, the show, and let's get this done. Mm-hmm. So read verse 12.
Yep, it says, and are not Avna far apart. Excuse me. The river. You read.
Are not Amanah, and yours says Avna. Interesting. That's a whole discussion, but we'll go past that. Mm-hmm. Are not Amanah and Parpar, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel?
Are they better than the waters of Israel?
Yeah, okay. Meaning they're bigger. They're more serious rivers. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. You go into the Golan Heights, which is at the foot of Mount Hermon, of what really Syria is. And all of a sudden, it's a different, situation.
And that is amazing, though. It is amazing.
There's rivers everywhere, there's water everywhere, and
rushing waters.
Yeah. And here in Israel, we've got the Jordan, which is like a little smaller than some of the sewers in other countries, like quite literally. All right. He says, "Shall I not wash in them and be purified?" And he turned and he went away in anger. Or does yours have fury?
It went out in heat.
Okay, okay.
I'm just kidding. That's
the literal Hebrew.
That's the literal. Okay.
Okay. Yep. And his servants came close and they spoke to him and they said, "Father," I think it's interesting they call him Father.
Yes.
Is it such a great thing the prophet has spoken to you? Why don't you just do it? Shall you not do it? And even that he told you wash and be purified. Well, what's the big deal?
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yeah.
And in verse 14, and this is really cool. He went down and he baptized himself in the Jordan 7 times.
Come on with that.
According to the word of the man of God. And I intentionally translated baptized because this is one of the few places in the Tanakh where we have the Hebrew word for baptized. Mm-hmm. Now, let me finish the verse and we'll go back to that. Yep. And his flesh returned like the flesh of a young boy, and he was clean. He was purified. So why do I translate that baptized? I'll hear in the Hebrew roots community, they don't want to use the word baptized, so they use the word mikvah, and they'll say I was mikvahd. But mikvah is actually mikvah is a noun in Hebrew. It means a pool of water. The verb is taval, to be dipped, literally to dip. And if you want to
make it the word of the week, Nehemia.
Can we make that the word of the week?
Okay. It's a really important one.
So the word is litvol or taval. Mm-hmm. Every word in biblical Hebrew we've said has a 3-letter root. The 3-letter root is tet, bet, lamed, and it means to dip something. And I love one of the examples that appears. I'm sure we've talked about this before, but one of the examples. And by the way, in Leviticus, where you have the laws of ritual, it talks about washing in water, and it specifically does not use this word. The only time you will find this word is, for example, Leviticus 14:6. It talks about taking a bunch of stuff, and it says, and dipping them, to dip them in something.
Did you give the 3-letter root?
Yeah, tet bet lamed.
I completely missed.
This is his China-itis.
Yeah.
So, for example, Leviticus 14:16, it says, and the priest will dip his right finger, in the oil, etc. Anyway, so the word is taval. So if you wanted to say, you can't say I was mikvahd, you could say I was tavald if you want to speak Hebrewish. And I love the example is Ruth chapter 2, verse 14, where we have a really clear image of what this means, taval. Let me read you from the King James Version, see what the Familiar English is for those who read that. And Boaz said unto her, to Ruth, at mealtime come thou hither and eat of the bread and dip your morsel in the vinegar. And some people actually say that she dipped it not in vinegar but in hummus, because the word is chometz, which is from the same root as hummus, which is chickpea dip. So anyway, and today we say to dip. So he dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times. He baptized himself, and it's interesting. He could have stood on the shore and taken kind of like one of those puddle baths. Yep. I know when I'm traveling and I can't really get to a shower, I'll stop and at the airport and I'll do one of those situations in the sink.
TMI.
Okay. Anyway, so that's washing in water, or that could be washing in water. Yes. Here he completely immersed himself.
Yes.
He dipped himself like a piece of bread in the vinegar or in the hummus. It's to be completely immersed. And he did it 7 times.
According to the word of the man of God.
According to the word of the man of God. And I think that's really interesting. Here we have the only time where someone is purified, in the entire Tanakh, as far as I know, as far as I can remember, where someone's purifying themselves by dipping themselves in a body of water. Never happens any other time as far as I know. Really interesting.
You don't think when they went through the Red Sea that they were being baptized?
But they didn't get wet.
They didn't get wet. That's a good point.
It was a dry baptism. Maybe they were being baptized. Maybe they were being baptized in the flood in the time of Noah, but those were the people who it killed them, so they weren't really reborn.
Isn't that true?
Yeah. Isn't it interesting though? He's it's like after he is baptized 7 times in the Jordan River, then he has the flesh of a young boy and he's clean. Interesting. Verse 15.
When he returned to the man of God with all his company and came and stood before him. Now he's actually in front of the man of God. Behold, now I know that there is no God in all the earth, and I think, but in Israel. So please take a present from your servant now. And before we go any further, when he makes that statement, see, when I read that statement, I go back to the beginning of the story. Okay. And about how, we don't
need to feed the man of God, he's going to feed us.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's just that, when I'm going back to the beginning of the story, before the section, Naaman himself, it's that Yehovah had given victory. That this young girl had been captured, that this young girl ended up being the ambassador to what was going on there, that the Father in his amazing, orchestration, how far it goes and how deep it goes, that literally by the time he says this, he says, now I know this. So let's go backwards. How does Naaman know this? Well, Aram went and took a slave girl from that place and she became a slave, and that girl ends up being the one to tell the wife, and who tells the husband, who goes to the husband, who goes to the king, and the king sends the message, and the message gets I just go story by piece by piece by piece, and in all of it I see God's hand. That this story to me is just, I don't know, there's something so encouraging about it. I just see God's hand in every single act that takes place from the very beginning of the story all the way till here. And what is the end of the result? The end of the result is this situation has become a light to the nations. This man says, I now know there is no God in all the earth. Because of what? Not just because of him dipping, but because he's had an encounter with the creator of the universe.
Well, I think that this is the reason that Elisha didn't come out initially and perform the hocus pocus. And look, he could legitimately say, I heal you in the name of Yehovah. Yes. There's nothing wrong with that biblically, as long as it's clear that it's through Yehovah. We're asking him to do it.
Amen.
But I think the reason he didn't is he knew he was dealing with a pagan, and the pagan would immediately confuse the man representing Yehovah, the divine man, the Isha Elohim, with Elohim himself, with God. This is in the pagan mind. It's especially in these days, it's very easy to confuse God with a man who represents God. And I love it, and I know you make fun of me of quoting the New Testament, but I love there's a story.
No, I don't make fun of you. I think it's amazing that you do that.
Story in the book of Acts where Paul and Barnabas are in some city and they're healing according to the story, and the people look at this and they say, "Oh, we know what's going on. These are 2 gods that have come." Yeah, that's Hermes and that's Zeus. Like, no, they're men who represent God. They're not gods. But in the pagan mind, if a man of God performs a miracle, then they confuse that and think that is God. And so that's why he said, look, you don't even need to see me. This isn't about me. Yeah. This is about God, and here's what God told you to do, the word of God.
Amen.
And I think that's what the story is about.
And that's why I say the story is so amazing to me from the beginning to end, is that you just see that we don't know the king's name. We don't know the king of Aram's name. Elisha doesn't come out and say anything to him. We don't know the girl's name. We don't know. All we know is God did an amazing thing. And now we're going to get to the controversy. We're going to get to the controversy here. I don't know if we're going to get out of this section. But it says, but he said, who said this? Elisha said, as Yehovah lives, again, there's that word, Hi Yehovah. We talked about it before.
Hi Yehovah.
Before whom I stand, I will take nothing. And he urged him to take it, but he refused. And we know the story goes on later.
So why did he refuse?
Maybe he refused because he said it's not about me. Don't give it to me. I didn't do anything. Maybe it's all about Yehovah. I don't want to have any aspect of you worshiping.
Wait a minute. He's performed the healing. Now it's time for the tithes.
He didn't perform.
It's time for the tithes and the offerings.
No, he didn't perform.
Pull out the checkbooks and the credit cards.
Yeah.
Look, I've seen these healing things on television. This is how it works.
Okay.
But that's not how it worked back then.
That's not how it worked there.
Huh.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then of course, here comes this verse in Nehemia. I think this is worth asking why. Mm-hmm. Naaman said, if not, please let your servant at least be given 2 mules load of earth. For your servant will no longer offer burnt offering, nor will he sacrifice to other gods, but to Yehovah. So he's bringing this dirt back.
To make an earthen altar.
Yeah.
And that's Exodus chapter 20, verse 24.
Do you think it's Exodus 20 he's thinking, or do you think he's saying, I'm taking something from the land where this God did this amazing thing, and I'm bringing it back to where I'm at?
So why not a pile of stones?
I don't know.
Why not a pile of wood to make a wood altar? Or, I don't know.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a combination of both. And look, what I am reminded of when I read this is a Jewish custom or tradition, which probably comes from this verse, not the other way around. When Jews were in the diaspora, and even today, Jews who die off in the diaspora will often have a clump of earth from Israel thrown into the grave, so that you are in a way buried in the land, not often in a land of exile, but in the land of your forefathers. But yeah, there is definitely something about I think there's 2 things here. One is he wants the dirt clearly to make an altar. That's not a question. But why does he, why the dirt? Maybe it's Exodus 20:24. Maybe it's he's realizing, okay, this is the holiness of the land.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? Well, I wish we could end the verse there. We could end it there and not have any controversy. We could end the verse.
And I can't go past this.
Yeah.
I want to read Exodus 20:24.
Okay.
It says, Mizbach Adamat Haselia, altar of earth you shall make for me, and you shall slaughter upon it your burnt offerings and your peace offerings, your flocks and your cattle. And every place I cause my name to be mentioned, I will come to you and bless you. And maybe, just maybe, Naaman knew that if he brings this dirt back and makes a dirt altar, that Yehovah will mention his name there, and there will be a blessing.
Nehemia, it's not often you go too far, but Naaman is not reading the Torah, and he doesn't know about Exodus 20:24.
Maybe the slave
he's bringing
girl.
back.
The slave girl told him.
He's bringing back earth because that's where the God did what he did, and he's bringing it back. He's a pagan. You say he's a pagan. You can't say he's a pagan, and now he's reading the Torah. He didn't read the Torah, Nehemia.
Maybe he's a pagan that knew the Torah because the slave girl told him, "Hey, look, Naaman, now you believe this stuff. You better make a dirt altar because Yehovah will bless you there."
Okay. Well, let's go on because I think the next gives us even further indication
verse
of
18.
what he's dealing with. Now, here's the part I say that's controversial because maybe if we could end the section there, we could have a nice little argument. But then it goes on. In this matter, may Yehovah pardon your servant. Now, I want everyone to just slow down with us, get your Bible, and read this in whatever translation you want. I don't care if it's in the Hebrew, the Greek, the Septuagint, whatever it is. In this matter, may Yehovah pardon your servant. He calls him by his name. When my master goes into the house of the false god Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon. When I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, Yehovah pardon your servant in this matter. This is a problem. This is a major problem. No. First you want to say he's reading the Torah. If he read the Torah, if he's reading the Torah, he knows this is not.
Well, wait a minute. He knows in the Torah. He knows at least the principle. He's not allowed to worship another god.
Amen.
And that's not obvious to a pagan.
Okay.
Meaning, if a pagan could very easily see Yehovah performs a miracle, but he could then go worship some elephant god because the elephant god also has power to a pagan, and he realizes there's only one God. Where does he know that from? He's got to be from the slave.
So if he knows that, so what? So is there now going to be some sort of a special dispensation for him?
That's what he's asking for.
I'm asking. Is he asking for a special dispensation? Listen, I know now there's one God. Look, I've got the altar. I've got your name, Yehovah. Or is this a guy who's in the process of learning about who Yehovah is, and there's some sort of a grace here in the process?
Well, I think the key thing here is he's saying, look, when it appears that I'm bowing down to this pagan god Rimmon,
when I'm in the house of the false god, and we're worshiping there.
So his point is, and the word is bowing down.
Yeah, okay.
His point, and it says 3 times the word bowing down. It says when my master, meaning the king, comes into the house of Rimmon to bow down there, and he leans upon my hand, and I bow down in the house of Rimmon. When I bow down in the house of Rimmon, let
3 times he wants
let
to
Yehovah
bow.
forgive your servant for this matter. So why is he bowing down? Because the custom and the ritual of Aram of Syria is that the top general, he sticks out his hand so the king can more easily bow down.
Yeah, but he bows down with him.
His point is, I'm not bowing down as worship to the God. I'm bowing down simply as respect to the king. And it appears that I'm bowing down, but it's not really pagan worship. But I don't feel good about it because I'm bowing down in front of a statue. So, you know what it reminds me of is in many churches, they'll, especially like the Catholic and Greek Orthodox churches in Israel, I don't know about other places, they'll have this statue at the front of Mary or whatever and other things. And there's a very low entrance. And literally the purpose of the low entrance, they'll tell you, is so that anybody who comes in here, even a Muslim, even a Jew, will be forced to bow down before our statue. Because you can't, unless you can do like the limbo thing where you, you put your knees real low. For most people, you're going to end up having to lower your head to get into the door, and it'll force you to bow down. And the question is that really worshiping a pagan god when you lower your head in order to get into the door? And I'll tell you, my father in his entire life never stepped foot in a church because of this. Mm-hmm. To him, he didn't even want a situation where it would look like he was coming to worship in what he saw as a place
so you're
with idols,
in the
with statues.
you're in the Naaman fan club. You don't think he actually bowed down and
well, he physically prostrated, but it was
in front of a false god,
but for the purpose of sticking out his hand and letting the other guy lean on him. And so he's saying, "Look, I'm not really worshiping, so can I be forgiven?" And what's the answer?
Well, hold on. Before we get to the answer, I just want to be clear now. You're saying that he's saying, look, here's what I do. I'm not really doing it.
He's clearly saying that. Yeah. The question is that legitimate, his excuse?
Yeah. So why doesn't he just say, he had an encounter with the creator of the universe. Why doesn't he just say, I quit my job and now I'm going to be an Israelite? Why doesn't he just join?
You mean he goes?
I'm asking, listen, hold on, let me finish. What he had an encounter, he had a situation take place, he's healed from his leprosy. Why doesn't he just say, the gig is up, I'm not going back there, I'm staying here, I'm going to convert.
I'm going to enroll in the conversion program in Israel.
Or I'm just going to...
And then in 12 months from now, I'll apply for citizenship in the state of Israel.
Well, that's what they would say there. I mean, so he can't, but basically, this guy, he could never become a citizen of Israel.
You mean a moderate?
Present day.
Absolutely not. No.
Absolutely not.
Because he's worshiping in the house of another religion. Absolutely not. They wouldn't let him. Yeah.
So he is worshiping in the house of another religion.
Well, it appears that way anyway.
It's what exactly is going on. I'm just telling you, it's what's happening. I think what he's saying is, look, I'm guilty. This is what happens. Look, it's the god Rimmon. He's saying the name. He's saying the false god's name.
The house of
so
Rimmon.
let's just assume, I want to give worst case scenario, that it really is that bad. I want to just to assume for a second.
Well, but he's clearly saying my heart isn't worshiping the God, even though my knees are.
Let me just say this. I think it's as bad as it is. I think that it's as bad as it looks, and yet the prophet says something that I wish we could hear in our hearts right now, where he says, Lech le shalom, go in peace. How can the prophet say, go in peace? There's got to be some theological reason here. What does this mean? Maybe this doesn't really mean go in peace. Maybe it means something else. Maybe it's like, don't bother me about that. Just get out of my presence. Don't make me have to answer. Or is Elisha saying this?
Wait, can I give you go ahead.
No, I'm going to ask it. I'm fired up here.
No, I just got something.
Okay, good. I'm asking the question, and excuse my excitement here. But is Elisha really saying, listen, man, give some extra words. You're good at this. Give us some other words that maybe it means something else. Is he really saying? Okay, good. Tell us what it is.
So Jerusalem is Yerushalayim. Maybe he's saying Lech Shalom, go to Jerusalem.
Yeah.
No, this could be the rabbinical answer. This is the type of thing the rabbis would come up with to say, we know what it says in Scripture, but it can't possibly mean that. So here's the excuse. Elisha says to him, go to Jerusalem and worship there. And he disobeyed, and he went and worshipped in the house of Rimmon. And that's not what it means. He's really saying go in peace. And I think he's saying go in peace. You could disagree with me, because he's acknowledging this is a really bad situation. There's this, the man's life will be lost if he says to the king, look, I can't give you my hand to bow down because you're a pagan who's worshiping in a pagan house. So instead, he's saying, look, my heart isn't worshiping the pagan god, even though it appears that my knees are. And in practice, I'm going through that ritual. It's not, my heart is with Yehovah, not with Rimmon. And that, I think, is why Elisha says to him, go in peace.
Well, you know what?
And you can agree or disagree.
Agree or disagree. The only thing I would say is this, is that Elisha is a man of God. He knows exactly what's going on. He's seen what's happened. This has been a miracle. And I just think this is going to sound really maybe I'm getting a little liberal like you. that for him saying go in peace is a way of saying I acknowledge the difficulty. I acknowledge the fact that the situation is what it is. I acknowledge that you came from a pagan society. You have an encounter with God in the land of Israel, but you're not going to stay here. You're actually going to go back to that place. You're going to go back to that job. And there are people listening right now. There are people listening right now who are in similar situations. And let me tell you what I mean by that. They're in their life. They're going about their journey. And all of a sudden they have this encounter. And this encounter is... there's no question about it. I've had people call and say these things to me. I've just never understood Sabbath. I never understood Sabbath. But guess what? My job has me working on Sabbath. And they're like, I'm under conviction. And this is a really big deal.
Yeah,
I'm under conviction. I've had it, my eyes are opened, and I could actually give testimony about this. My eyes are open. What do I do? And I can hear Elisha saying this to them. Lech leshalom. And your process, go in peace now. God will work this out. Your heart, your spirit, your mind is right. And I do not say you've got permission to go and do whatever you want to do. Don't forget about the Sabbath, whatever. I'm saying that God has this amazing way. This story, and I will just tell you this excites me. This story shows me about the bigness of God and the grace of God that takes a man from a pagan, rooted, worshiping false God situation. He has an encounter with God, and the prophet says, Lech leshalom. Go in peace in the journey. If we hear the story later, I wouldn't be surprised if Naaman, 6 months later, Naaman's not even there anymore. He's not even in that job anymore. Maybe there's some amazing thing that happens where Naaman is completely delivered out of it. But in the moment, he could say to him, go in peace. And I want people to have that. I want people, Nehemia, to hear that word. I'm sorry I hit Nehemia.
I just got punched.
He's like, I punched him. He's like, look, I'm down the other end of the world.
The guy's so excited he's punching me.
I'm punching Nehemia. No, because listen, you probably aren't going to remember this. Can I end with this? In the first process 12, 13 years ago, when I first had an encounter with God's time, God's Torah, God's name, there were things that I was a part of. There were things that I was doing that didn't match with what happened in Israel. And you didn't say it this way, but I could hear the Spirit, Lech leshalom. In the process, let God be God. You're just now coming into a place of understanding certain things that radically change different aspects of your life. And I just want to say this, this man, when Elisha says that to him, I can just hear the word grace. The grace that, listen...
Can I just show you? I wrote in the computer here, grace, on my notes.
No, you did, really?
Right here.
No, the grace that says there's a process, there's a journey. I could give you another biblical... Well, I don't want to...
Can I just say this? I think the message here is God, Yehovah, the creator of the universe, he's less judgmental than we are. Yehovah is less legalistic than we are. He has more grace than we do. Because if this was us, if this was the religious establishment...
And this guy came...
Naaman, you must now renounce the king of Aram. You must... cast off all the...
You must never go back to that land.
He'd say, Naaman, you can't have that dirt because the sacrifice can only be brought to the temple in Jerusalem. And instead, and you're going to go... So you're doing two sins. You're sacrificing to Yehovah outside of the place of the temple. And number two, you're bowing down the temple of Rimmon. You are a heathen. You are... And I hate... Oh my God. Can I just... Look, I'm vexed.
Now you're going to hit me.
I'm vexed.
He punched me.
No, I'm vexed. Can I tell you why I'm vexed?
Yeah.
I'll deal with people who don't think like me, who don't have the same faith as me, who have different concepts than I do. And I'll be criticized by my Jewish brothers and sisters. And I'll tell you very, very intensely, even more so by my Karaite brothers and sisters. And their response to me is, Nehemia, how can you go and have an interaction with those people who have a different theology, a different doctrine? And here's the phrase they use. They say, can I just say it outright? They'll say a Christian who keeps the Torah, I've been told this, is no different than a man who immerses himself in the mikvah holding on to a dead rat. This is the phrase.
Nobody's ever said that to you.
It's actually a phrase in Hebrew, not about the Christian, but holding on to the dead rat. And the image there is, yes, I've immersed myself in the mikvah to clean myself, but I'm still continuing to be constantly exposed to the uncleanness. That's the image of immersing yourself in the mikvah, holding actually a sheretz is the word in Hebrew. And I've been told, Nehemia, how can you interact with those Christians who keep the Torah? How can you interact with those Hebrew roots people? They're no different, from our perspective, as I've been told, than someone who's immersing himself in the mikvah and holding on to a dead rat. And I say, can we let Yehovah decide that? Here are people who want to serve Yehovah, the creator of the universe. Here's people who want to keep his Torah. Here's people who love the people of Israel. Why would I condemn them? Why are you condemning them? Let Yehovah work it out for them, and let's just empower them with information. And rather than saying, "Oh, we've got to have the anti-missionary organization. We've got to convert the people. We've got to convince them why they're wrong about the verse in Isaiah and why they're wrong about the verse in Zechariah. And then bring them into the fold and get them to stand before the 3 rabbis and immerse themselves in the real literal mikvah." This is the mentality. And I say, you know what? That's not what I'm about. I love this example of Elisha, where he says to him, "Lech l'shalom." He's empowered him with information, and the rest he needs to work it out for himself in fear and trembling with prayer and study before the creator of the universe. And even the prophet Elisha, that's all he does. And now I'm reminded that I had a conversation with a gentleman, I think it was about a year and a half ago, and we were talking about this exact issue. And this is actually a man who used to be a Christian and now is gone in the direction of I guess really rabbinical Judaism now. And he said to me, "Nehemia, I just can't. I can't continue to condone what you're doing. You're speaking about Yeshua and you're not condemning the people who believe in him." And he said, "Can you show me any example in the Tanakh where the prophets didn't condemn that which wasn't in line with the biblical understanding?" And I actually brought this story.
You're kidding me.
Yeah, and he just ignored.
And you haven't talked to him since.
Well, I have, but he ignored that and said, "No, I want to follow I want to be like Elijah in Mount Carmel and cause the fire to come down on the Messianics and the Christians and have them burned up." That was his position, and I said, "You know what? If that's what Yehovah wants to do, he'll do it. What I'm going to do right now is go in the spirit of Elisha."
Amen. You know what, Nehemia? With that, I get to pray. I'm kind of excited. I have a very simple prayer for people, and I want people to just take a minute. Is it all right if I can do this? It's humbling to be here, and it's humbling to open the Word of God and to find a story like this where you can't always come up with a nice, clean little answer. Yeah. But in prayer, what I want to think about those people that are out there right now that are listening, that really are in a process of discovery.
Stop. You hear that? That's the religious police.
They're coming to get us in the basement apartment, not far from the Knesset. What are we in the side of a mountain somewhere?
We're on the side of a mountain.
Side of a mountain. We appreciate your listening. But I want you to just take a second for those that are listening, just to bow your heads and close your eyes and think for a second. What would it be like for you if you have that encounter with God and that encounter that finds you in a place where it doesn't always match, it doesn't always fit with what maybe people think are supposed to be correct and according to the rules or the regulations, and not only the rules and the regulations, the statutes, the judgments, the commands of God that we know that are true and that are real. And at the same time that God we find a story like this where we see a man that just breaks the situation. And there are people that are listening right now that are in difficult situations, whether it's in relationships and jobs and circumstances. And I only have one simple prayer, and it's really only 2 little words. I say to that woman and to that man, to that child, or that family, Lech la shalom. Lech la shalom, go in peace. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you for listening to Prophet Pearls with Nehemia Gordon and Keith Johnson. For more information, please visit nehemiaswall.com and bfainternational.com.